This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agner.
Big countdown.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jay Agner. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. Today, I am lucky enough, and this is going to be a fun one. My friend, Jon Mercer. Hello, buddy.
Hey, Jay.
Man. President, board member, co-founder of Startup Bucks, which is an org I love. I wrote the little tagline down here. It's an organization that pairs economic development and venture funding to support and grow innovative, scalable startup businesses. How did I do? Pretty good?
No, very good.
All right, I could do your advertising. So, been on Founders 30 a bunch of times. We can get into that, but I didn't really realize you'd founded a few different things, and you're down in the city, so you're definitely like living the Philly vibe. Talk to me about where you grew up and where you went to school, and then did that have an impact on your entrepreneurial journey as you took off?
Yeah, it did. Yes, I grew up in Woodbridge, New Jersey, which depends who you ask. If you're talking to people in Philly, it's North Jersey. If you're talking to people in Jersey, it's Central Jersey. If you're talking to North Jersey people, it's definitely Central Jersey. Yeah, so grew up there, born and raised, public school all the way through. Parents, both entrepreneurs. Mom from Jersey City, New Jersey. Dad from Canada originally. Mom owned beauty salon, spas in New Jersey. Dad was like a kind of do-it-all, general contractor type guy. Never wanted to work for himself, never worked for himself. Stubborn. Yeah, so then I went to University of Michigan for a year and a half, right out of school. I was in the undergraduate business school. Wasn't really sure that's what I wanted to do once I got into it. There was mental health stuff too. It tends to be when you go to college first. So I took a semester off and took some classes at Rutgers, and in-state tuition was very attractive. Found it relatively comparable. Yeah, and 20% of the cost. So stayed at Rutgers. I did economics, information technology. I don't know if you care about my majors. I don't know if they matter.
I'm curious. I was curious. I did see the IT background. I'm curious. What made you want to go after that path?
I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, to be quite honest. I knew I wanted to stick with economics because I came out of the business school. But then, honestly, the way my credits transferred from Michigan, they had 4 credit classes. Rutgers had 3 credit classes. I basically had room for a double major. Otherwise, it would have been a bunch of throwaway classes, or I could double major. I just looked at the list of majors on the Rutgers website and said, yeah, IT, informatics, that sounds pretty cool. Talked to a few people. And that's the way I went. And then ultimately ended up with Johnson & Johnson in IT.
What's informatics? I've heard
informatics. It's not used anymore, but it's kind of don't quote me, but the study of how IT affects kind of human interaction.
Okay.
IT, informatics. Okay. Yeah, I think it's a dated term now.
Yeah, I don't hear it. It seems like a dated term. You don't hear it very much. So tell me about that. I mean, the mental health thing is interesting just because I still find it, and I'm going through it now. I was just telling you, my son's graduating high school, and it's a weird thing to be 18 and to be like, hey, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And just go figure it out now. So tell me a little bit about that transfer from college life to the real world for you. You went to J&J. What was that kind of transition from college to real, 9 to 5 life for you?
College to the real world was pretty good, actually. It was more the transition from high school to college that was tough. Hadn't been away from home for too long. I mean, I traveled a lot when I was a kid with parents. So I did like an exchange program in high school too. But depression and anxiety were always a thing. I didn't realize what they were. It was always kind of there, like come and go. And then especially like in high school, like after puberty and then I guess things kind of can change a little bit, but never addressed it, right? And it's funny to say, but like back then, it wasn't something you talked about as much. Right. And then got to Michigan, there was the stress of like tuition and loans, and my parents were helping a little bit. So that was, felt like a weight as well. Then you're with like a whole bunch of people that are like super high caliber and it's competitive, right? Like, okay. And then there's the extracurriculars with fraternities and drinking. I didn't realize at the time how much that affected me in terms of multi-day like depression after. So all those things. And then, the stress of not knowing. Some people, a lot of kids coming in were like, I'm going to be this. I'm going to be an accountant. I'm going for finance. Either my parents went to graduated college So I was the first as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of like benchmarks there. And then there's also the pressure from parents, ironically, entrepreneurial parents and family of like, gotta get your degree and make sure it's something that that's transferable to a career. And so it doesn't really give you that time to figure that out.
Right.
All those factors. And then it just was like, I'm not feeling right. Something doesn't feel right. I was working a 30-hour job at Michigan, which at the telefund, raising money for alumni funds, became a manager there. So like on this, like externally, everything was great. Like out of the business school undergrad, but just didn't feel good. Like
Hmm.
didn't feel like anything was like satisfying. Like even when I got the letter that I got in business school, I was like, I don't know. I feel like I should be excited about this, but I'm not. So all those things, so it became something I needed to address, and came home, started, therapy, and eventually realized medication because it's a condition.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety is a condition. You got to accept that too. So then, yeah, but ironically, the transition from school to the real world was more like, all right, this is like I see where this applies now. I'm actually like producing things,
Right.
and it's not just grades. And yeah, that was a little easier. That was like less stressful, frankly.
Hmm. Well, it sounds like you'd maybe addressed it at the point you were
Yeah.
going out the real world, so that probably helped.
Mhm.
Mm. So you founded a bunch of stuff. Did I read it right that you founded something in Australia? I don't want to
Yeah.
go into it yet. Well, let's get there. But so talk to me a little bit about your J&J out of school. With that, you had a short stint and then a long stint at J&J. Like there was two separate ones, or were they the same thing?
No, it was all the same
Okay.
thing, but just
Okay.
multiple different
Okay.
business
Bunch of
roles. Yeah.
different roles there. Okay.
Yeah.
And so was the startup for the what was it? Was Leading Minds? Is that the one in Australia?
Yep.
Was that so that was after J&J, right?
Yes.
So tell me about kind of the J&J experience and how it led you into becoming Mr. Founder, who went off and
Right.
did a bunch of things after.
Yeah, I think naturally, kind of like with entrepreneurial parents, I always felt like I wanted to go off on my
Mhm.
own and do something. I think the plan I had was like, time I was like 30, 32, do something unless something came along. So I was, with J&J, I was in IT, so digital marketing with consumer brands. So like Aveeno, Splenda,
Mhm.
Neutrogena, more on like I suppose started as a co-op and ended up developing and like reports to analyze the effectiveness of campaigns, things like that, and then ended up in data center project management role, which not as exciting as the consumer stuff. This was a rotational program I started with, so that's why I did a lot of
Mhm.
stuff there. And then I ended up my final placement after the rotational was in IT procurement. So like enterprise level contract negotiations for application development services. So negotiating with like Cognizant, TCS, who else? Google, even anybody that was providing services for
Mhm.
J&J globally, negotiate like global rates and things like that. So I was involved with that. That was okay. I liked the negotiating part. I liked that it was like high level, big dollars, right?
Mhm.
But knew I wanted to do something else. I knew I wanted to be more on the business side, so to speak, maybe marketing out of IT. Because when you're in IT and tech, and it's not really tech, right? When you're in IT in a big company like
Right.
that, it's more of just a functional support call center, right?
Mhm.
So I had the opportunity, just came up from a guy that I was working with on a project at J&J that was from New Zealand, based in Singapore. He managed IT procurement for the whole Asia Pacific region, which included Australia. And he knew that I was interested in international rotation, something closer to marketing. And it just so happened that at the time we had like a global conference where he was here. I was in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and the procurement lead for Australia and New Zealand was there too. And he had someone going on maternity leave for 6 months, coming up in a few months. And this guy from New Zealand just connected us and said, hey, maybe instead of bringing a contractor, you could bring John over. We could work something out and have someone backfill him. Long story short, it worked out. Ended up in Australia, 6-month assignment in 2014, got extended to 12 months. Then when I was ready, almost a month before I was set to come back to the States, this role opened up in Australia in medical device innovation to develop services to supplement the medical device products. On paper, perfect for the role, got the role. It was a brand new team, manager, super smart, science guy, R&D guy. In reality, it turned out not to be very entrepreneurial. We didn't have budget.
Mhm.
I think the manager maybe being the scientist, that background was like, we're going to figure this out and then bring it to the marketing teams. I was like, no, we got to go to the marketing teams and see what they want so we can budget from them. Long story short, it was about a year in. There was actually some mental health stuff at that point too. So it was a combination of that. There was then also just realizing, this is not what I thought it would be. So I quit. I resigned and took some time to travel for a while. Had a couple of things I was kind of stewing on, but ended up back in Australia. And because of like the workplace the mental health thing, I felt like in the workplace, there was never really, it was stigmatized, right? This was 2015, 2016. There's people coming out about like with like celebrities and like Harry and Meghan at that time, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were talking about it. And it was different in like a corporate structure, right? I'm worried about, right, what if I'm going to get that passed up for a promotion, or people are going to worry that I'm not going to follow through on things. But I felt like, if you're able to be open about it, talk to your manager, talk to your team, like, hey, I'm just feeling anxious, I'm having a bad day today, it's better for everybody, other than when you're holding it in, it creates more of this perpetual cycle, right? Downward spiral. But yeah, so I had the idea to maybe find some role models and senior business leaders that would share their stories in Australia about lived mental health experience, whether they had to take time off work or kind of work through it. And started that, called it Leading Minds. Ended up becoming a bigger thing than I thought it would be. I thought I would maybe just find some people, get a story produced, and end up finding a job through that in Australia, because I wasn't a resident, I wasn't a citizen, would need sponsorship. I had planned on staying in Australia for my indefinitely at that time. So I really moved there. Had a lot of good friends that I made. I think because you connect on being expats. So I had a good crew. We would get together every Sunday for like a dinner and everything, right? So yeah, so I liked that. And I was an only child too, so this felt like I kind of had a family there. But yeah, so I ended up running this project. It was hard to find people because you imagine nobody's like out and like there's no community for that. I was actually talked to a guy that did a similar initiative for LGBT senior leadership in Australia. He came up with a list of 50 people that shared their stories. It was this whole thing called Outstanding 50. But I met with him first, and he's like, "Man, you're gonna have trouble because with the LGBT community, there's a community. Like, there's people that know each other and can connect you along." He's like, "There's nobody out hanging out like about like depression and anxiety." Well, anyway, yeah, it was tough, but I kept like just getting referred to one other person, another person, and ended up finding about 25 people. Had potential sponsors with Deloitte and EY. I didn't know like how to work those conversations at the time. Was talking with like a leading mental health body and organization that was funded by the government of Australia called Beyond Blue about collaborating with them. This is about 4 or 5 months in, but then my dad was sick back in the States. He really had no family other than me, so I had to come back on short notice. He had passed pretty quickly. He had cancer for a long time, but didn't tell anybody. And ended up sticking around, had to get his affairs in order and continue to run this project from Australia. Ended up getting it published in the Australian Financial Review as a whole series where they did a lot of the photography and interviews and things of leaders across the big 4 consulting firms. So EY, KPMG, PwC, and blank on the last one. Forget one, KPMG, PwC, EY, Deloitte. There you go. So it was cool to see like competitors like alongside each other saying this is more important. So yeah, it ended up well. And then I was back in the States, back in New Jersey. And I'll pause there. Sorry, that was a whole like.
But my number one question.
Yeah.
Do Australians think that the American accent is cool like we think the Australian accents are cool?
Yes, to an extent.
Okay.
Yeah. I would think
like my buddy's Australian, and like he's in marketing and sales. He crushes because of it. He's an awesome salesman, but like it definitely adds like a little bit of extra flair to it, for sure.
Yes, it was helpful. And I would hear people like on calls for work and things that multiple times people would say, "Wow, you sound like you're from the movies." Like, because they see most of the movies are American movies.
That's great.
But the American thing didn't help much. This is, it's at a time when America, like maybe 20 years before it would have been.
True.
2015,
2016?
Yeah, it's 2014 and 2017. Okay. So, yeah, I thought with like, I was single at the time. I thought it would be like, oh, American guy.
Yeah, Mr. American.
No, didn't help. I think also Sydney, apparently. I mean, Sydney, like, it's metropolitan, cosmopolitan, very diverse, but like they're not as interested in people that aren't from there. Like people that are from Australia and Sydney, and you're
Mhm.
like, whatever. Whereas like I would go to like New York sometimes, and being from New Jersey, and they would hear I wasn't like from Brooklyn or New York, and be like, the bartender, like, oh, where are you from?
Right.
Like in Australia, it was just
Yeah. It's
no,
like
okay.
yeah. Cool.
Also, they don't get tipped there, so they didn't really care about
That probably
conversing or
yeah, it doesn't
butter and
the
yell.
small talk doesn't matter as much for getting tips.
Exactly.
So that was a whirlwind tour. You came back
Mhm.
to the States. Did you work anywhere else? I saw the professor thing at Temple for a little bit, and then Stacks was kind of your next. Was that the next kind of move for you when you came back?
Yeah, I had got into kind of multifamily property thing, investment property, so I did that
Mhm.
for a little while, and then, yeah, Stacks, it kind of aligned with the multifamily, like, property management kinda stuff.
Mhm.
But, yeah, I just found myself in Doylestown, in Bucks County, and, the girl I was dating at the time was from there, and I was still running this is late 2017, early 2018, was still running the project, Leading Minds in Australia, and wanted to be around other people, other entrepreneurs, and just kinda coordinate and organize meetups, people to get together at bars and restaurants times a week, and
Mhm.
so many people were coming out after a few weeks. I thought, co-working space, and this was when WeWork was really popular, so I just started talking to people that were coming out and asked, "Would you join a co-working space?" And I started one, and they're like, "Absolutely." So I had 12 people signed up before I even opened the doors, found a place. This was, like, in March when the idea came up. It was open by May.
Hmm.
June 1st was the official opening, 12 members, and then grew to within a year and a half to like 85.
Wow.
Had events and things there, expanded the space. Yeah, but there were a lot of challenges too. A lot of issues with landlords and the property itself, and
Mhm.
uh, some of the members that came in that ended up not like bigger, like larger groups of people, and ended up not wanting to be share things. So dealing with that. So, but no, it grew pretty well. That led to Startup Up.
So I'm curious from the first customer perspective, that always comes in different flavors.
Mm,
The one I want to talk about with that one specifically is the sale. How
mm.
essentially the sales process, you could argue, is it was a customer of your business, right? I mean, you had to present this to them, they had to want it. And so tell me about that process. How did you sell it? Like who was, I mean, you don't have to name names, but like, how did you make that happen?
Yeah, so I originally started looking into selling it in late 2019, so only year and a half in, and because it was at a good point, it had grown quite a bit, I was already kinda working on startup bucks and like that, not s necessarily more or less, but wanted to focus more on that, and yeah, I approached a few people that were actually members of the space that had mentioned maybe partnering at one point, and just really I had to put all the data together on membership, revenue, of course, and expenses and costs, and present that to them in a nice package. And that's something, if you're considering selling a business at any point, even though, I mean, I would say don't necessarily build a business to sell it with the objective of selling,
Mm.
especially in startup world when you're raising venture capital. I mean, you probably eventually want some sort of exit or conversion event, but make sure you're keeping it organized. So if you're trying to sell it, it's nicely packaged. So at that time, I wasn't as organized with things, so it was kind of going retroactively, pulling things together. But the biggest thing was that the people that I first approached, that were approached me, were in it, right? They had been there, they had seen the product, they'd seen the value of it. So as much as you can kind of get people to either whether it's product that they use it, they understand it. Those are the people that like it, right? That are already using your product or involved or in some way connected. Though I imagine I don't have stats, but are often the people that you sell to.
Right.
At small business level, I'm sure different with the big corporates too, but
Sure.
a lot of times there's people that probably work for one company, move to another company, and know that other company that they acquire. So, but yeah, that would be my advice if you're looking to sell. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
first approach the people that understand it. Anyway, so I was in a few conversations then, and the pandemic happened. So
Mm-hmm.
shut things down for a while. Those conversations went away. Could have just walked away at that point, really, when the pandemic started, because we couldn't operate. Like, no, it's supposed to be 2 weeks, right? And then it ended up being several months. And in hindsight, if I'd walked away, it would have probably could have focused on other things more. But it kind of went on with like life support, just keeping things alive, keeping things going. There was a song and dance of like things reopening, closing again, different requirements, so constantly adapting. So kind of learned a lot through that, but it was really mostly breaking even that whole time. Our bucks was growing, so that was a welcome distraction, diversion. But yeah, in hindsight, it probably would have been better to walk away. But yeah, early 2022, I knew the lease was coming up and had the option, didn't need that much space anymore, could downsize a little bit so to increase the margins. And there was a place available right around the corner. So the natural buyer was the owner of the building, the first person to approach. And I talked to business brokers to kind of help that out. That's something that's important too, I think, if you have a business broker that kind of plays the middle person. So you're not, takes out the emotion a little bit. But I talked to the owner. I said, hey, I'm either going to move out, or if you want to make an offer, let me know. I didn't think somebody would necessarily want to buy at that point, considering the pandemic and the history of that, anyone other than the owner, and just the uncertainty of what could happen with it, even though it was a couple years into the pandemic, and the size of the space and everything. So talked to the owners. They made an offer. It felt like it was good, and just went ahead with it. There was due diligence process. So fortunately, I had at that point, because I was considering selling it before, had things being organized. Processes and things weren't that well organized. The folks that had been working for me were well versed in the day to day, but they really were helpful with putting processes and things together too as it got to it. So yeah, natural buyer. I kind of think of who would be the best fit, who has the most to gain or lose. In that case, probably a unique situation. So yeah, it worked out. I stayed on for 6 months after. Relatively very part-time. If they needed anything, they reached out, and then was done by like October of 2022.
Wow.
Out of correct. Yeah.
Which may have been around the time I found Startup Bucks. Maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So that's naturally takes us into Startup Bucks.
Right.
So tell me where the idea came from. I think you co-founded it. So who's the co-founders? And
Yeah, so that was the out of Stacks co-working space. There were a lot of entrepreneurs working out there, folks in the tech kind of space, potentially either with venture-backed startups they started, were working on, or were service providers that were working with startups. And there really, a few of us were talking and felt like there's really nothing for those types of companies, for venture-backed companies, for startups that are looking to scale, doing something a little different in Bucks County. You had to go to Philly. This is in 2019, right? You had to go to Philly. You had to go to New York for any like community like that or events, maybe Princeton, right? If you're lucky, there's something happening there. So the first thought was like, let's just run an event, like a weekly, like meetup. And I don't know if you heard of 1 Million Cups.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was a friend of mine mentioned that to me. He started like TEDx J&J, TEDx Penn State. And he also had a friend that started a thing similar to Startup Bucks in Fargo, North Dakota. And he used 1 Million Cups as one of the things they ran. So we looked into why I was looking into that. And it just so happened like the day after I was looking into it, one of the guys that was working on space, John Kantz, who had founded a health tech company and exited that. He approached me in the hallway at Stacks and said, hey, I was thinking, I was involved when I was living in Dallas, Fort Worth area, this 1 Million Cups thing. What do you think about doing something like that here? I was like, dude, I just literally had a call with them yesterday. So just the serendipity. And that's a lot of this stuff, just the like tangentially or on the side, like the serendipitous stuff you miss from being in like a workplace or a co-working space with others versus mostly remote stuff. So yeah, that happened. A few of us, Michelle Bison, who was a freelancer, was working part-time for Stacks as well. Candace Yeager, who now she's in Florida, but her and her husband had a solar company, brokerage, essentially. And she was a business success coach as well, mentor, advisor. So the four of us started 1 Million Cups. We were hosting it out of Stacks starting in summer of 2019, early 2020, or along the way, more and more people were coming out. About 30, 35 people in person every week. We're just finding startups wherever we could. A lot of people coming out from Philly, New Jersey, sometimes New York. It was all in person at the time, right? And then the county government folks, commissioners, chief operating officers, economic development people started taking notice of it, that there were companies like that in Bucks County. They didn't realize that. So I was eventually approached by a guy, Pete Krause, who is the executive director of the Industrial Development Authority, which is one of the economic development entities in Bucks County, quasi-governmental. And he went to the event, one of 1 Million Cups. He came up to me. He's like, I had no idea these companies existed in Bucks County. We had some funds that could go toward them, but we don't really understand these types of companies. And at that point, we had started the nonprofit, had a good board with including angel investors, lawyers, entrepreneurs that had experience with startups. And he said, do you think you could put something together to get funding and support to these types of startups? And I said, absolutely. Figure it out. I mean, I had no idea how to do it at that time. It was $250,000 they had that could be given as $25,000 loans, really, but it came from some federal funds. He sent me all the documentation requirements. You can imagine hundreds of pages on that, on how you could use it. And we found this clause called micro enterprise, which he knew about, but that it could be any financial instrument that could be used for it. So we ended up going with a convertible note, and which is essentially a loan that could convert to equity some point down the road. And then we established the application process, the screening process with the Industrial Development Authority's input, all the criteria, had a screening panel together. And the pandemic again, so we weren't sure what would happen with that. And ended up that Pete Krause, who was, again, his vision originally, he passed earlier this year. But yeah, he's been involved with so many things in Bucks County with, the Pennsylvania Biotech Center. You were, I think, at one of their galas. He was very instrumental in getting that started. So many things he had his hands on at some point, but really was behind the scenes, everyone the credit. And yeah, it was his vision. He was supportive all throughout. And we got it off the ground in late 2020 was our first application round. He felt like, this is even more important with people going more remote. We might not be able to support in-person businesses, right? Coffee shops, breweries, things like that. So this is super important. Yeah, put that together. It had the economic development component where there needed to be some hiring as well. If the company needed to be based in Bucks already. And since then, there's been four tranches of $125,000 each. There's been 19 investments. We still got one more to go that's carrying over from last year. And then the grants that have supplemented the program that were sponsored by Penn Community Bank. So all up, there's been over $300,000 that have gone into early stage startups in Bucks. A ton of great success stories. It's getting close to 15 million total raised across the companies. And we can't take credit for all of that, but we support them for at least a year as per the agreement with the IDA. And we have regular check-ins. It's not an accelerator per se. There's no curriculum. It's industry agnostic. But we're more like an advisor. We treat it really more like we're not the investor per se. The Startup Bucks is not the investor, but the IDA is. But we treat it like it's an investment that we're making. We're an advisor to them. We have a stake in that. So they call us anytime they need us to sit on a meeting with the supplier or service provider, help them with negotiations, whatever it might be. Apply for more funding, get connections to investors. We're there for them all along the way. So even beyond the 12 months as well. Yes, there's been a lot of cool stories, a lot of cool companies that have come out, and we call it's like a, Ben Franklin Technology Partners, right? It's like a baby Ben, we call it. So we have kind of helped bridge companies to them and others.
How does the Founders 30 fit into?
Yeah, so Founders 30 was 1 Million Cups.
Okay.
The 1 Million Cups, we went virtual after the pandemic, all online on Zoom, which actually ended up being a good thing because it had more reach. But with 1 Million Cups, you're limited to the format. You have to have two presenters every week. We didn't like that. It was supposed to be about getting feedback to the presenters, but we didn't like that. You had to wait till the end of the Q&A period to ask the founders what the community could help them with. It seemed kind of counterintuitive to wait, have everybody just ask them questions and then give them 30 seconds, tell everybody what they need, and then how do you actually get them the feedback on that when you have to just get to the next presenter? So we were making the format our own. We had one presenter a week. It was started with their questions, which you've seen on Founders 30, right? It's all about them, all about their questions. And getting answers from the audience rather than the audience asking more questions. So we just called it Founders 30 because it was usually about 30 people originally, and also 30 minutes of feedback for the entrepreneurs. It was for the founders. So founders, apostrophe S, intentionally, right? Branding.
I didn't catch the location of the
Yeah,
apostrophe.
right.
It makes a lot of sense
Right.
now. No, those are fun. They're always a
Yeah.
good time. Always a great time, and I've recommended people check it out. I missed the one. Was it last week with Trip B? I think it was
Yeah,
the.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I met her at the PSL Expo.
Oh, cool.
That's a cool product. I like that. So lots of stuff there, but I want to. If you had to start up Bucks again tomorrow, with everything you've learned so far,
Mhm.
it's unique. It's not necessarily business per se. The normal question I ask is, what would you start off with again tomorrow? But it is still applicable. What would you do tomorrow? The first step if you were going to start a Bucks over again?
I might not have gone the nonprofit route because yeah, it was more obviously it was focused on Bucks County.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the originally we started the nonprofit when we were doing 1 million cups, really just because we said probably more we can do, but if nothing else, we could at least kind of collect donations for coffee and tea and some of the events and things.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought that was the way to go. Didn't really consult with probably enough people. We thought we kind of looked at Philly startup leaders and thought, okay, kind of something like that. But it didn't need to be a nonprofit to run and start the Bucks Built Fund. Probably helped a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We could have ended, we were essentially consultants, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of things you got to be concerned with nonprofit. Obviously, it's not easy to start one. It's much easier just to start a business, start an LLC, open an LLC, and there's a lot more reporting required. You got to worry about how much your directors or executive team is making.
Mm-hmm.
Our executive team was basically doing all the work, so we couldn't really balance that. Other stuff I'm actually learning now with a new director coming in, that you only want like 10 to 15% of your revenue going to your executive, your leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, it's not a law or anything, but it's in terms of like other organizations looking to give you grants and things, they might look at that. But it's tough to do when your leadership team's the one running the programs too. Yeah, might not have gone the nonprofit route. Probably would have started with an LLC, but then maybe kind of bolted a nonprofit on there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I can't say that for sure. That just
Okay.
would have been more, would have considered that more.
That's
But if we hadn't gone nonprofit, then we wouldn't have been able to get like the Penn Community Bank grants from their foundation, things like that. So a lot of good stuff had come from it.
sure.
Our board is great. I probably would have gotten more entrepreneurs involved in the board. We had really 2 entrepreneurs out of like 12 board members,
Mm-hmm.
or 3, but it was mostly like anybody that was just involved, right? In there, the kind of the people that showed up. Would have started with a smaller board and grown it over time as well.
Okay.
Because it just becomes a lot to kind of wrangle. Our board members actually early on when we had our first meeting were not interested in getting funding to startups. It's only when the Bucks built with the Pete Krause approached me that became an opportunity.
Right.
And that's something I had always wanted to do. That was my priority. But once you have 10 board members in the room, you're like, nah, you don't really have much say in that. So
A smaller board to start sounds like a good one. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Give me 3 tips, health tips that you're working on to increase your longevity. And that could be anything, mental, physical, whatever. But what are 3 things you're kind of working on to keep yourself tuned up for as long as possible?
Gotcha. One thing is, I mean, actually, obviously, fitness, exercise, I don't go too hard on, right? I don't think you need like super intense stuff. I also had a neck injury from high school football, so can't really do heavy weights or anything, but
Mhm.
I just do enough, right? I'm not running. I got into running a lot, 5Ks and that when I was in Australia, but I found myself like more tired because you got to know your body, right? I felt like I was
Right.
more like brain fog when I was like recovery days. So just feel that balance. I don't say I got to work out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or any particular days or times. I have a whiteboard actually in the bathroom that I just kind of track things. So it's like always there. You always brush your teeth,
Mhm.
right? You hopefully always take a shower and you always kind of see it
Mhm.
in front of you. So that's something like if you're trying to stick to it, just have it somewhere where you're going to see it all the time. Don't just have it on a phone, like a list in your phone or anything on your computer because it's not in front of you all the time. It's easy to close it up and not think about it. I've got a few things I do, like I can pick from. I like running stairs here. We're on the 7th floor of this building. So I run stairs. I don't run as much because that was giving me some like hamstring issues too.
Mhm.
But I found my body likes the short burst sprint stuff. So
Okay.
I'm doing stair sprints. elliptical now and then. And then anytime I get the chance to take the stairs or walk rather than take an elevator, I do that too. That adds up.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't track anything other than the whiteboard. I think that could make you crazy a little bit and upset you if you don't hit your targets.
Mm-hmm.
Eating as well. I mean, I just eat as healthy and clean as I can. I got to be selective with the things I eat because I'm like with dairy upsets me, peppers, onions, so kind of helps me eat a little healthier.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's number 2. The second.
Yeah.
What else? What's the other health thing? I mean, probably friends, family, community, right? Be around people, have that support network, and being open about mental health, how I'm feeling, how I'm doing, and having those conversations. I mean, that goes a long way.
Yeah. I think these are all great. This is the first bathroom whiteboard I think I've had on the show, so that's a good. But I love I mean, when I'm back at my house, my whole backdrop is a whiteboard. It's a
Okay.
giant, a wall is a whiteboard. So I'm totally in tune with you of just like having your stuff in front of you, and like it's much easier than keeping track on the phone. I love all 3 of those. Last thing is the mystery question. I've switched up a little bit recently just because I don't want to make it too easy, because if I don't, then it's easy to make the answer. So, non-business related. If there was one thing you could do that you knew you wouldn't fail, what would it be?
Non-business related.
Yes, like people will say, well, I'll make my business, like make a nonprofit and make it the best one in the world, or what. So, non-business related, something personal for you. Maybe it's a bucket list item, maybe it's whatever. What's one thing you would do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Ooh, that is a good mystery question. I don't really have a bucket list, to be honest. That doesn't come into play.
All right.
I don't really have any desire to like climb any mountains or anything.
All right.
And I would do that even if I knew I could fail. I mean, that's part of the excitement and the challenge of it.
Sure.
Maybe this is maybe an odd one, but I do want to have kids, but have kids, right? I mean,
Right.
that's
a good one.
Yeah,
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, probably not gonna have kids for another 5 years or so. Girlfriend's younger, she's 27. Focus on her career too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I'm always, there's always a hesitation. I mean, I don't know if you had that before you had kids. Of like,
I did not. I had mine at 19, so there was actually
No.
negative hesitation. I think that was the wrong. You're talking to the wrong guy about hesitation with kids, but that's a great one. I love that. I do like that a lot because I think there is I have like friends and family that are don't have kids, that are just, and they haven't because they're hesitant to have them. But I think you'd be a great dad.
Thank you.
You'd be
Yeah, I hope
awesome.
so.
I think you got a lot of
Ah,
positive things going on.
Thanks, man. I don't know if there's necessarily like success or failure of having kids, but I think I don't want to look back. Like I've heard from many people that I look back that really feel like they could have spent more time with their kids, more quality time, or included them more. I don't know if it's a work-life balance thing. I'm not a big work-life balance guy. If you like what you're doing, and you could include your kids in that and focus on the quality time. But yeah, I think that.
I love that answer. Well, let's wrap it there.
All right.
This was great. I really enjoyed getting the full picture of Jon Mercer. I had no idea about the trips abroad and the Johnson. So very cool, man. How can people find Startup Bucks? How can they find Jon Mercer? What are the best ways to do it?
Yes, startupbucks.org, and on founders30.com. Don't put the apostrophe in the web address. It doesn't work. And if you want to email me, John, best place to get me, John, Jon, at startupbucks.org. That's the email I'm in most of the time.
Well, it's great, man. Thank you for giving me some very valuable time. You're a busy guy. So thank you for enjoy the summer. We'll come to the next Founders 30 in person, because I think so. There's any of those coming up anytime soon?
We're gonna do happy hour last Wednesday of every month.
Okay.
So, and then we're gonna eventually do some Founders 30 things in person. Probably more like biannual, kind of like recap, check-in, summit kind of thing with startups that are presented.
Okay.
In person.
I like that. I love that. I'll definitely be at those. Well, be good, bro. I'll talk to you.
Too.
Thanks for good rest of your day.
Yeah, we'll check.
Thanks, John. See you.